Good morning, everyone. Thanks a lot for coming in. This is my first talk ever, so if you saw the talk yesterday, it is going to suck. Okay. So today I want to talk about decoupling Django with Django REST and our sprinkle JavaScript. Who am I? I am a JavaScript developer. Can I say JavaScript in this room? I don't know. I really love Python and I use it whenever I can. Starting this year, I'm serving as a coach for Django Girl, and I would like to encourage you to support this community because we need more women in this field. It is important. I have a blog where I share everything I know about JavaScript and Django, and that's it. Oh, this is me when I was young. Can you spot any difference? Everything stayed the same except the hair. So let's see the plan of this talk. There will be an introduction to decoupling, to the terminology mostly. And this talk is aiming mostly at beginners. If you're a more experienced developer, consider this as a reintroduction to Django REST and Django. And then we will see how to set up a JavaScript frontend, namely with React. And there's a lot of focus on testing because I'm a bit paranoid about testing. And then there will be conclusion and resources. The goal of this talk, I want you to give a loose guideline for structuring a Django project with React. But I want to stress on this, I'm not endorsing React by any means. What we are going to see applies to any front-end library, really. I want to show you also the challenges of a decoupled approach, because there are many. By the end of this talk, if you're a beginner, you should be able to starting up with a Django project, with a Django REST project, and set up a JavaScript frontend for interacting with the API. Introduction. A bit of backstory. So last year I wrote this article while trying to scratch my client's itches. The article has been well received by the community. Brad Traversy did a YouTube series on his article. I don't know if this post made more damages than other things, but anyway, this is how this talk started because someone pinged me on Twitter and said, why you didn't propose a talk to PyCon 10 about this topic? And I said, okay, let's do it. So what is decoupling? Imagine a classic Django application where you have your template and you might want to expose the data that are in your database to the outside world. So you do this by creating a REST API. In this case, we will see how to create a REST API with Django REST. Decoupling Django means exposing your data as JSON entities. Anyway, this is not specific to Django. Every web framework, almost every web framework can be decoupled. For example, Drupal. There's a lot of stuff going on Drupal for exposing the entities as JSON. There are many modules. Development is ongoing. So this is not specific to Django. But anyway, maybe it'd be interesting to see how to do that in Django. So imagine you have a link model in your application, and that link has a bunch of fields like title, URL, tags, which is a relationship to another model, and we will see the model later. If you decouple your Django application and the application has this link model, you will end up with the following result. So with a JSON array containing a lot of JSON objects. Oh, by the way, JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. Is kind of a protocol for communicating between services. So why you may want to decouple? Because decoupling can give you a lot of flexibility. Most of the projects I work on have a backend team and a front-end team. So you can develop, the front-end developers can work in isolation from the backend. I don't know if if this is the right thing to do sometimes, but also there is no need to fight build tools, and we will see what that means later. So decoupling gives you a lot of flexibility, but can give you a lot of problems too. Because with the tragedy of JavaScript, the rising of JavaScript imposed more problems and challenges to more traditional web frameworks. The problem I can see are mostly about code duplication, because you have to duplicate the code for validation on the front end. You have to add more testing to the front end, while in Django you may want to test with Selenium or Splinter on same context. So challenges. Search engine optimization, that's important. So if you, in your application, you care, if your application should care about search engine optimization, then you may want to reconsider if you want to decouple, because as of today, Google can crawl your JavaScript pages, but at the first wave, it reads just the head of the page. The JavaScript will be executed on the second wave. So to overcome this issue, we used to use server-side rendering, which imposes other challenges. You need Node.js for server-side rendering, because if your front end is JavaScript, is React, is Vue.js, you need to pre-render that JavaScript with Node.js, and then you can expose that static page to the outside world. So search engine optimization is an important topic, and server-side rendering is not that easy. Authentication. Now, we can think of authentication in a context with Django. We know that there is a fantastic built-in authentication, and we can just use that. But if you're going to decouple, you need to consider that if the front end is fully decoupled, you don't have access anymore to the Django built-in authentication system. So you may want to explore JSON web tokens, which are another topic on their own. So authentication is an important topic. Logic duplication. We know that Django has a lot out of the box, like validation, model forms. So if you decouple your front end, you're going to duplicate your logic for form handling and for validation too. That's an easy task. More testing, as I said. You can test the API, but you are going to test the front end too. And if you're testing inside a Django application, you have Selenium that works really well. But you have to consider code duplication when it comes to testing too. More developers, because there are going to be back-end developers and front-end developers, because really you cannot keep up with a modern front-end workflow. There is a library every day. It's almost impossible. It's a job. Studying the modern front-end, I think it's a job on its own today. It's not an easy task. So when to decouple? Because not every application needs to be decoupled. I want to stress on this. So if your application has a lot of JSON-driven interaction, then it is a good sign that you may want to decouple. You're building a mobile app. So you have this mobile app on the client's phone, and there is a backend interacting with the app. Or maybe you're building just a dashboard for internal use, so you don't care about search engine optimization. You can also avoid compiling modern JavaScript code. For example, if you have a customer which uses just the last version of Chrome, you can avoid a build step, but this is just an idea. when not to decouple. Really, you should ask yourself if it makes sense to decouple. If the application has no JS driver, has little or no JS driver interactions, then there's no need to decouple. Please don't put JavaScript just for the sake of it. If you're concerned about search engine optimization, then you should consider if you may want to decouple, because search engine optimization is important. Or if you want to decouple just because everyone's doing the same, that's what I call medium driver development. Don't do it, please. Django REST framework. So Django REST framework is really nice. It's a Django application for building REST APIs on top of Django. You can install the package with pip install Django REST framework. Before going further, we should talk a moment about Django models, because Django REST framework builds upon Django applications. And for getting started, you need a model. So this is a quite simple model. We have a bunch of fields, and the tags field is a many-to-many relationship with another model that I didn't include there because there was no space. So imagine you have a couple of models or 100 models in your application. You might want to add Django REST framework, and the next step after creating these models is the serializer. So the serializer in Django REST framework, think of it as a layer between Django models and the outside world. So the serializer transforms the JSON to Python objects. Of course, you can also serialize more less complex Python objects. In this case, I am using a model serializer, which is a mirror of a model form in Django. Okay, so when you use a model serializer, you can just interact with an already existing model in your application. Here I am exposing just 3 fields. You can also expose all the fields, but don't do that. There's no need to do that unless you have specific requirements. So for exposing all the fields, you have to declare a string. Otherwise, you can just go with a tuple. And since my model had a relationship with another model, I can expose to the outside also this relationship with a string-related fields, and then we will see later the result of this code. Once you have a model, a serializer, you may want to create a view. In Django REST framework, you can create a view with a function, so that's a functional view. There is a decorator for that, API view. And of course, you have to import the serializer in the code. The decorator can accept the HTTP methods, so you can declare get. Of course, if you want to declare a post method, then you have the logic for handling that post method. There is the query set for getting all the models, and then we can declare the serializer. That many true is important. At the end, we can just return the response. So if you need specific requirements, you can use a functional view, because you can, of course, customize the code for your own requirements. But even better, we have generic views, which abstracts away all the work for us. So in this case, the list API view is a Django REST framework view for handling the list operation on our API. We can declare the serializer class as an attribute of the class, and then, of course, we have the query set. Last step. after creating the serializer, the model, and the view, you can wire up the view with an endpoint. This is a silly example. Anyway, you have these URLs, and you can specify what your API endpoint will be. So in this case, when I hit API link, I will get a response from the server. Of course, the result of doing this will be this array, this JSON array with JSON object. And that tags is a many-to-many relationship with the tag model. Oh, now comes the hard part, setting up the front end. So, and again, I don't want to endorse React by any means, but I like it. And we will talk about React today. So React is a front-end library for building user interfaces. It's said that React is allows you to build composable, reusable user interfaces. You can install the library with npm i react DOM. Of course, you have to be in a Node.js project. So React builds upon this concept of components. Now, we used to write components as classes, as ES6 classes. Today, we can write React components. We needed classes for handling the state in React. Today, with hooks, we can handle the state of a React component inside a function. So this is why I'm going to show you a function. So React components can just be JavaScript function. Here we have a form component which takes some props. Since the form has to handle the submit event, I am passing a function from the outside. Of course, I didn't have too much space inside this code, but imagine that this handle submit is a function. So we can return our form, which takes props. So why React is composable and reusable? Because as you can see, I can pass props.children to my form component, and from the outside here, I can pass in whatever components I need that form to display. Input and button, of course, are other components defined somewhere in the code, but it should be enough to be comprehensible. Now, once you have a Django REST framework application and a JavaScript frontend, you may want to glue things together. That's what I consider the part of the workflow, because there are many ways for pairing up React frontend, JavaScript frontend with a REST API, and I came up with two practical approaches. The first one, this might look really trivial and simple. Create React app inside a Django application. Of course, I just left there init, admin, and all the stuff from the Django application, but of course you can just remove them. So you have this React app inside a Django application. But you have to build this front end. So when you're inside that folder, React app, you can run npm run build for spitting out the bundle. And when you run npm run build, you will get these files. You will get these files which are not compatible with the Django templating system. You will get an index.html with these chunks of JavaScript. Each chunks has a unique name which changes during your workflow. So at this point, there is no way to wire up this index HTML with a Django template, because in first instance, these files are automatically generated, so there's no way to track them. Because we do need these inside our Django template, we need the static tag followed by the declaration of the file that we want to include in our template. So out of the box, there is no way to wire up these two things. This is the problem with React and the Django templates. So to overcome this problem, we can use a custom Webpack configuration. That means you create a custom JavaScript project inside your Django application. The relevant part is the src folder, where I organized the application a bit. And as you can see, we have a webpack-config.js, babelrc. All this configuration is abstracted away in Create React App, so you don't have to worry about them. But if we need more control over the bundling phase, we need to create a custom configuration. At this point, we have control over the bundle path. That means this is a Webpack configuration. So I can say exactly where I want to Webpack to place my JavaScript files. The relevant part is path, where there is the static folder. At this now I have control over the bundle, and I can reference that file. So as you can see, the output of the bundle will be a main.js. I can reference that file inside my template because it's a fixed file name. Again, that might sound really basic and silly. Of course, you should not forget to expose a view inside your project, and when Django will load that view, that will be the unique source of truth of your application. So that view will become a single page application, basically, and will reference that main.js. That's it. But when your application grows bigger, maybe you are going to introduce a state management solution like Redux or MobX, whatever. Or when your application has a lot of components, a lot of dependencies, you can really get by with a single JavaScript file because that bundle will be enormous. At this point, in your Webpack configuration, you can use an option called split chunks. So split chunks is amazing, but you will end up with a lot of files. So what split chunks does is splitting every dependency of the project into its own file. So at this point, how do you wire up all these automatically generated files with a Django template? There's no way to do that out of the box. There is a nice package called Django Webpack-loader, but there is a pull request which is not going to be merged anytime soon for making this Django Webpack-loader work with the split chunks options of Webpack. And this poses a real problem I wish we had a Django Webpacker like Ruby on Rails. Ruby on Rails has this package called Rails Webpacker, which automatically injects all the files coming out from the Webpack bundle inside the Rails template. Maybe we can build this tool together. I don't know. Maybe I will try someday. Maybe this should be something included in the Django contrib. But anyway, it's a neat idea. So at this point, I came to this conclusion. The winner is, in my modest opinion, a fully decoupling front-end, because you get the best of both worlds. You have this Django, you have this JavaScript application communicating with the API, and you don't have problems anymore. But of course, don't forget to enable Django course headers, because you will need to deal with course if you make a JavaScript an HTTP request from a front end to an API. So do you even authenticate in your application? Because when we decouple our application, we may run into these issues. You need to find other ways to authenticate your user. Django has this fantastic built-in authentication, but if we have a decoupled front end, we need to find other ways. One of these, of course, if your JavaScript frontend is in the same context of the Django template, you can just use the built-in authentication. So you authenticate your user with the built-in authentication systems, and you get the token, and you make the API, the HTTP request. Of course, if your frontend is fully decoupled, you have to use some sort of token-based authentication. The package I am liking the most these days is Django REST Framework Simple JWT. There was another package, but it had security issues. So use this package. Oh, testing. Let's go really quick about this topic. For testing the front end, you have a lot of options. There is Selenium, but unfortunately in Selenium you cannot stab the API. By stabbing, I mean faking the API for working in isolation. Also, there is semi-automatic waiting, because Selenium cannot wait for JavaScript to load. You have to specify how many seconds you want to wait. Cypress is a really neat tool. Can stub the API, so you can fake your API, you can provide a fake JSON response. From there, we can test your front-end installation. It has automating waiting, so Cypress will wait automatically as soon as your JavaScript will be available, or if there are network interactions, Cypress will handle that for you. Splinter, Fiorella De Luca had a talk yesterday, it was really nice, but it's a Selenium abstraction, so it has the same problem, I think. It cannot stop the API. This is how a test with Cypress will look like. We will have a user story, and here I am faking the API. I am faking a post request to the user token endpoint, giving my frontend unauthorized status. From there, I can assert that the UI contains the unauthorized message for the user. For testing the API, there are options too. There is API simple test case, which mirrors the simple test case from Django, is an extension of that class, but you have no DB queries there. API test case, where you have the DB available, and API live server test case, which is the same as the live server test case of Django, so you have a static web server. Our API test will look like. Of course, in the setup method, I am just creating by hand my models, but in a real world, you may want to use a factory for generating your models. Anyway, here I'm creating my models, I am declaring some path, and in my first test, I will assert that when the user is not authenticated, the response will contain a 401 status code. This is how a more complicated test will look like. This is a test for an authenticated user. So I am just creating a user, I'm making a fake user. Force authentication is a method on the test class. And here I'm just asserting that the user will have the 200 status code with the response I am expecting. So at this point, there's a mini demo. Can I show them? Okay. So what I want to show you is just a silly Django application. So, of course, don't do this in production, please. This is... there is a GitHub repo, by the way, with all the code used for this talk. And in that repo, I just splitted the configuration for development and production. Okay, so don't do this in production. This is just for fun. As you can see, I have a bunch of endpoints, routes. If I hit link to... I get the JavaScript application, and that is the custom Webpack configuration. So we can see here that if I type a wrong password, I get this error, and we can see the fetch request to the Django REST backend. Let's see also how a Cypress test looks like. It is the Webpack, custom Webpack configuration. Oops. Oh, this is a UI tests with Cypress. If I run this test, Cypress goes over the URL, makes the request, checks that the message I am expecting when the user is authenticated will be print. You have this nice interface for testing and for seeing the output of the test. As you can see here, the routes of the API are completely isolated. So I'm not hitting the real API here. I'm just hitting a stub, which I wrote in my test. So this is how the test will look like. This is the actual stub for the unauthorized response. This is the stub for the authenticated user. That was the demo. Let's conclude really quick. Conclusions. So, Django REST framework is great. Is a configuration over coding, because with generic views, you can really just configure your endpoints, configure your code. Of course, if you have specific requirements, you have to write some code, but this is our job, isn't it? There is built-in pagination too. Of course, you have authentication with that module. There is also a token-based authentication built into Django REST framework, but it's a bit archaic. I would always use that package. There are permissions too, so you can check if the user is an admin, if the user is just a regular user. Oh, you can also throttle the requests to the API, so you can avoid issues. Where to go from here? You may want to, if you're a beginner, you may want to investigate more advanced topics like the DERF router, which gives you the possibility to specify just the resources you want to expose. So let's say you have a user model and you want to expose all the endpoints for that user, post, get, put, delete. You can use a DRF router in combination with a view set. Resources. Of course, the official documentation for Django REST framework is great. Shameless plug, I wrote that tutorial, so you may want to take a look. This is a GitHub repo I prepared for the talk. There are the two applications with the tests. Oh, the custom webpack configuration uses a Redux too. I wanted to give you just an overview of how to configure a React project with Redux. Check out the documentation for the library. And we're done. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
These are the slides for talk.
So, any question? Yes.
In my experience, I've seen that it's better to split the backend and the frontend into separate, also repo, but also code. Why do you prefer this way?
I wanted to show the two ways of doing this thing. Honestly, I prefer the fully decoupled approach because it's more easier to reason about. You will fight the build tools if you want to inject the chunks inside your Django template. So I just wanted to show you that it could be done that way, but there is a better way too.
Another question?
Hi, thank you for the presentation. Just a bit challenging question, maybe. If you strip away all the part like templates and such from Django, you still think it's worth using it? Maybe a more simple solution like a simple Flask?
Of course, yeah, of course there is Flask too, but since I really love Django, I'm always attracted by it. So it's maybe it's a bad habit I have. I don't know.
But you still think that keeping just the models and the authentication part is still worth it?
I think so. Okay. There's a talk yesterday. I don't remember the name of the guy, but if you just comment out the built-in application in Django, you can just use the framework as it is, without the overhead.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we are finished. Thank you.
Thank you.